Hello, my name is Ethan Johnson, and for the Culminating Project in Sports Psychology, I'll be doing a little video on burnout and how we detect it and what kind of factors lead to burnout and ways to get around it. So, I'll start by kind of talking about what it is and who gets burned out and how we deal with it. And then there'll be a little interview with Paralympic silver medalist Miles Krosky and how he dealt with his time getting burned out, whether it was training or, emotionally, things like that. And then at the end, I'll do a little presentation on kind of a plan to help athletes get less burned out. But let's start. So, what is burnout? So, according to Timothy Neal of the National Athletic Trainers Association, he defined burnout as a response to chronic stress of continued demands in a sport or activity without the opportunity for physical and mental rest and recovery. Basically, in a more simple way, burnout is the effect of overtraining or overcompeting and how it affects an athlete's health with an athlete's health physically, mentally, and emotionally. Burnout can be a reason that an athlete quits a sport, gets injured, or just kind of changes personality, becomes somebody that you really don't know, and lets them just kind of lose focus of themselves. It is continually becoming a larger problem in athletics as younger athletes are becoming more and more pushed to specialize in a sport, become the next greatest athlete at their sport. Every dad thinks their kid is the next LeBron James or the next Mike Trout, stuff like that. And as these younger athletes are getting pushed and pushed more and more, it's a lot more easier to get burned out. So that leads me to the next part: who gets burned out? Typically, when we think of burnout, it's typically athletes, but it can also be coaches, trainers, officials, and even a couple of parents mixed into that. It is most common in athletes. More specifically, it's most common in youth athletes, typically around the high school age, are the athletes that experience the most burnout. I'll go into a little bit more on that, but with coaches, they can experience burnout with over-preparing, spending long hours at the office trying to game plan. Typically at bigger colleges or some larger high schools, there's a lot of emphasis and focus and pressure on the coach to produce results, to win, to recruit. All those things all combined can be a lot of stress. I know there's a lot of assistants and whatnot that help out with those things, but still, when you put that pressure on a coach to win constantly all the time and be good, it can really drain some coaches emotionally and physically. When it comes to officials and them being burned out, it can really happen because there's pressure to be perfect. I mean, when we play athletic events, we have officials to deem the right and wrong, call balls and strikes, in and out, penalties, things like that. So there's a large pressure on officials to, make that call right every time. We, as a society, we think they're perfect, and, what we can see, we always assume they see. And then when a call doesn't go our way for a certain sports team or athletic event, they are the first people or that fans usually come after. It's always, well, oh, the ref sucks, they blew this, they did all that. So it's becoming increasingly more and more field that has a lot of burnout in it. There are a lot of people who don't want to be officials anymore because the pressure and expectation is way too much. Nobody wants to, have that pressure to be perfect constantly all the time. And then this first time you mess up, everybody yells at you. There are also athletic trainers who can experience burnout. They're put under a lot of pressure, especially at at the university level. They're expected to take care of a lot of athletes across various sports. I know here at the University of South Dakota, two of our athletic trainers cover at least 3 to 4 sports each, and then there's a couple others that float through. But dealing with that many athletes, that many people who need to be taped, fixed, healed, things like that. And along with it, they creating rehab plans and making sure that athletes are progressing at the right level and recovering at the right speed, and how to get them to that level without also injuring the athlete more or overdoing it. It can be a lot of pressure to get all those things lined up, especially when you have to take care of multiple athletes across multiple sports. But the studies have shown that typically high schoolers experience the most burnout. Usually it's because they're trying to specialize in certain sports and they focus their energy toward one. Usually they get bored or overwhelmed quicker because you are so focused in on that sport and it's a constant need to, be in that sport. There's usually no break or like you can't go hang out and do a different sport because you quit it to focus on this one. So you don't really get that release, that free time to hey, I've been shooting free throws for 3 hours now, maybe I want to go throw the football around, things like that. It's a very common that once you become specialized you are constantly ingrained into that sport, and then that's all you think about, and it becomes a lot harder to get distracted and or take time off from that. So a study done by Ward et al found that 60% of all high school athletes experienced a moderate to extreme level of stress due to their sport, and a quarter of them responded or reported that stress negatively affected their performance as well. Along with that, typically high school athletes they have a lot on their plate. I mean, not only are they looking to advance their careers with sports, like getting a scholarship to university, but they're also focused on getting good grades so they can go to a good college. And then, as we all know, a very high pressure is put on high schoolers to be active socially. It feels like everything revolves around being popular and being the cool guy, and stuff like that. But it's really hard to socialize if you're always constantly involved with the sport. So that's why a lot of the high schoolers feel that pressure emotionally and socially, that they have to be there doing all these things. They don't get a break, and it can lead to burnout fairly quickly too. Another factor that comes along with high schoolers is the factor of athletics. Most people would assume that happens in college quite a bit, and it does. As classes get hard, you're progressing in your field. But typically in college, you have advisors, trainers, coaches that are all there to help you along the way. You can get tutors, things like that. So both typically in high school, unless you go to a teacher directly, it's a lot of doing things on your own or working in groups. So it can be difficult at times to be involved in all these classes, especially if you're involved in like advanced placement classes or dual credits and stuff like that, where they're actually counting for college credits. So you want to do a good job in those as well. It can really wear on somebody to have to balance training all the time for a sport, being socially active, and also trying to get all the schoolwork done all at one time. It can combine with a lot of those things, and also be involved in clubs. Many people tell you all the time that in high school, it's very important you're involved with things. It looks good on resumes, things like that. But it can also be time consuming. And so trying to balance all these things can just wear on a person's body emotionally, physically, and mentally. So all these things combined can really lead to getting that burnout. Along with that, the parents always having to drive their kids around, especially for like travel team things, and like stuff, and trying to balance jobs while raise children. It can be very emotionally and physically taxing on them as well, because it's just at times it can feel like a constantly go go go, we have to be somewhere doing something, and it needs to be taking that step back. So as we go moving on, what are the symptoms of burnouts in an athlete? Like I mentioned earlier, there's usually 3 types. It's physical, mental, and emotional. With the physical side of it, typically athletes can be noticed having sore muscles, joints, ailments. Physical burnout is usually caused from overtraining, either like during practices, like constantly going, sprinting, running, pushing the body too far, or it can, like I mentioned, can be caused during practices or in the weight room, overtraining your muscles, trying to get that extra rep done. It can be taxing on the body, and in combination with going to practice, you have to give your body time to set and rest and recover from certain things. Otherwise, it's pushing it and you're asking for an injury. With that, like I mentioned, the body isn't really being allowed enough time to recover from the stress being put on it. That can lead to injuries to the body, which can be very detrimental to an athlete's ability to play the sport. Not only can it keep them off the field, but if they hurt themselves in such a way, it could require surgery, which puts them out of the sport for a very long time. It can just lead to a whole bunch of a mess. It's very difficult. So trying to or taking a break on some of that, or like not pushing yourself as hard on the court for practice or in the weight room, can really help mitigate that just a little bit. Another form of burnout that is common is mental burnout. So, like I mentioned earlier, with high schoolers being put on a lot of that, we got to get academics done as well, so be involved. It can really drain on somebody mentally. So they can. It's a lot to put on a high school athlete as well, and as well as a college athlete. They don't have time to, it feels like they're constantly in the weight room or, at practice or things like that. So it can be, too much, like whether it's like, too much watching film, worrying about a competitor, scheming up, various plays or strategies or things of that nature. All of that, like that constant worry and anxiety, it can be very detrimental and just get that person's brain very fried and worn down and broken to the point where it becomes a struggle for them to watch film, point out schemes, be mentally engaged in practice. And it's a very important deal, because when we're not thinking clearly, we're not performing at our best. We need that competitive edge where we can see things before they happen, and we need to be at our best mentally to see those things on the court. For some athletes, it's like as if they don't have that time to get away. It's all they constantly think about is the next competition or the next practice, and just so super ingrained in focus, it's almost all they think about, which can be very unhealthy, especially when you're trying to develop those social skills and be friends with people. Now, the other form that I've spoke about is emotional. Many people can try to lump emotional into kind of that mental side of it. I think it's sort of its own thing, just because when you talk about mental burnout, it's usually like you just can't figure out what to do. You're struggling to get things done. It just feels overwhelming. Whereas more of the emotional side can be caused by various factors, whether it might be like a coach yelling at you constantly, hurting your feelings, or maybe being pushed too hard in practice, and that takes a toll on that body. Our emotions can also affect us physically at times. You're constantly worrying about things going on that it can cause that mood swings and things of that nature, be a result of burnout and becoming irritable and short-tempered. And those are some key signs to look out for emotional burnout. So along with that, emotions can affect our physical state. So being healthy, and it can because burnout emotionally can cause things such as headache, digestive issues, affecting our immune system, making us sick if it's not performing at our best, and other things like that. How we feel emotionally can really determine how healthy we are. There's many times in our textbook as well, it cites many examples of research being done on athletes experiencing burnout and how it affects each aspect of their lives. And a lot of them losing that why. Like, why do I compete? Why do I want to get better? A lot of times when you're burned out emotionally and physically, you take that step back and you look and you see, you're like, why am I doing this? Why am I putting my body through this? Wouldn't I be so much happier if I wasn't constantly doing this? It can be a real struggle for some athletes to deal with. So now that we know kind of, what burnout is and, what it looks like, how do we detect burnout before it becomes a problem? Well, Beth Sitzler of the NATA, or the National Athletic Trainers Association, mentions it's the job of coaches, trainers, friends, and family to recognize signs of burnout. She mentions one of the easiest ways to detect burnout comes from like a staleness, which is athletes not feeling like they are not making progress or they're plateauing. And this can lead to, not seeing results either on the court or in the weight room or, in the field. And instead of just kind of taking that step back and realizing, hey, we're not at our best, but we can do things to fix that, they jump into that mode of we need to overtrain. We need to keep going harder because that's the only way we're going to get better. If we're stuck, we just got to dive ourselves further into it. And that can cause overtraining symptoms, which lead to burnout. Some of the ways to see kind of physical forms of burnout can come from like the body itself. So watching an athlete move, they can be limping, hurts to move their body or appendages. They have bruises. They are constantly complaining of sore muscles, in the trainer's room all the time, getting massages, always being taped. It could also lead to taking painkillers or ibuprofen frequently just to be able to get through practice or lifts or things like that. If those are seen, it should be by the coach or the trainer or even officials to make sure that we're not putting these athletes in positions where they can get hurt because their body physically cannot take it anymore. When it comes to mental burnout, like I mentioned earlier, it really shows when it affects schoolwork. Not getting work done, putting things off, a drop in grades, not showing up for class, lack of motivation or willing to participate. Miles really talks about that in his interview, how he really kind of lost motivation at times, and he's like, why am I constantly doing this, or like making up excuses or finding ways to get out of certain things just because he had lost all of that, motivation. The people who should typically find when an athlete is falling behind mentally probably would be the academic advisors for the student, or the parents, the academic staff, coaches, or people that are close to the athlete. Their friends can notice, like, hey, buddy, we've been falling behind in class, what's going on? Can we talk it out? Things like that. Emotionally, we can see burnout typically in the form of mood swings, decreased socialization, lack of sleep, or being tired all the time because they can't fall asleep because they're constantly worried or thinking about the next competition or practice, or falling behind, thinking they're plateauing, things like that. Along with that, they can be shown in unhealthy eating habits, so like overeating, undereating, binge eating, eating disorders, trying to make weight for certain sports. I know that's big with wrestling, is that trying to make weight all the time is a constant, battle with a lot of people. So they are always cutting weight and doing unhealthy things, and then just to turn around and binge eat as soon as they make weight. These are kind of some examples of like that emotion of being burnt out affecting your daily life, whether it's like I mentioned, mood swings, unhealthy eating, lack of sleep. They can also show obvious emotions with it breaking down, like anger, crying, frustration, things like that. And obviously, these things are going to be witnessed typically by family, close friends, teammates, coaches, or kind of, the people that surround themselves with the athlete. So that leads into the next part, which is like, how do we kind of fix or mitigate burnout? Now, I'll get into a plan after the interview with Miles and kind of how all that works out. But the key thing to remember is that every individual is different. Each individual has a certain level to where they can be pushed mentally and physically and emotionally when it comes to athletics. There are holistic approaches to mitigating overtraining. So that really speaks to the physical side of overtraining, where like we develop plans as strength and conditioning coaches or just general coaches to allow for that athlete to not be overworked. We train harder at one spot and then we gradually like go down. We don't lose our strength, but we're not, constantly forcing those muscles to be broken down and overtraining and overexerting ourselves. That's one of the ways, in kind of a more, like I mentioned, a holistic approach where we relax the body itself. Along with that, communication is key to figuring out if you have burnout. Many athletes commonly don't understand that, coaches cannot they cannot fix a problem, or trainers can't fix a problem if they are unaware that one exists. I can experience it myself. I was always taught that, you're never hurt. You're never like, you play through the pain. And a lot of athletes do have that mentality where it's like, hey, I got to keep playing. I got to keep playing. It's, I have to keep going even though I'm in pain. And taking that step back and realizing you need to prioritize health, both, like I mentioned, physically, emotionally, mentally, is also just as important as being on the court. There's a old saying amongst a lot of coaches, particularly at the highest level, and it's that the best ability is availability. And so if you're not able to be on the court, they need to know why, and so that way there can be a plan devised to help fix that and get an athlete back on the court as safely and as efficiently as possible. Many more schools, especially colleges, are employing sports psychologists. So those are people you can go to talk to. You can set up times to meet with them. Having a support staff around you and people who can help you with various things, that's also huge. You need to have those people who they're going to be there to help you through every aspect of what's going on during your time being burnt out. So like I mentioned, that typically falls on your trainers, coaches, teammates, things like that. Two other kind of big things that can really help is seeing that self-worth, that positive self-talk and whatnot. You can also set like small goals for yourself in each individual practice. Like, hey, maybe I'm not, shooting my best from the field, but before practice ends, I'm going to make, 50 free throws. Or, maybe I just can't play good defense. So I'm going to take that time at the end of practice or during practice and, really focus on my defense and really like get involved with that and, win small drills. So that way you have that feeling of like accomplishment and you're winning at the day. So, because that'll create, positive and happy emotions, because at the end of the day, we play sports to compete, especially as we get into those advanced levels past, upper levels of high school and in college. Along with that, athletes need to take time to focus on themselves. Miles mentions this as well in his interview about just how he really needed to just find that time to be on his own and do his own thing, whether it was like going for a walk, hanging out with friends, just kind of having that break or reset from the sport itself can be really beneficial, because it just distracts your mind, it relaxes the body, and which can help benefit you at the end of the day. Along with that, sleep is huge. I mean, we talk about it multiple times in class about how important sleep can be, but especially with the physically side, being able to like have your body reset and drain itself from the day and getting that proper amount of sleep, it resets your body to recover throughout the night, as well as you reset your mind mentally. You get to be able to take that time and just not worry about anything or think about anything, and then you can take a fresh perspective to
let's get started. How old are you? What sport do you play? And then how long have you been playing in your highest level of competition?
I'm 19 years of age. I play pair badminton, and I've been playing since I was 10 years old, so 9 years now, 9.5. And my highest level of competition is winning silver at the Paralympics.
Awesome. So, Miles, during your years of playing badminton training, have you ever experienced burnout?
I have a few times, actually.
Really? When you got burnout, did it take the form of like emotional, physical, or mental?
I think it was a little bit of all three of them, both mental, physical, and emotional. Just because when burnout does happen to your body, it kind of takes a little stress to your emotions also. Because I remember one time it was 2 weeks before big world championships, and I pulled something in my groin area. So I had to take it slow until the World Championships, but luckily I was able to recover right before.
Good. So how did it affect you mentally? Like, what were you kind of thinking? What were you feeling? Stuff like that.
There's been a few times where burnout has hit me mentally, just because starting out at such a young age, that's not all you know, but it's pretty much the only thing you do know, because every single weekend I'd be going down to Lincoln, Omaha, or Sioux Falls to train. From when I was 10 years old to 13, I would train Friday and Saturday, but then from 13 to 19, I've been training Friday night until Sunday night, staying away from my family on the weekends, pretty much every single weekend all year round.
You've mentioned to me at other times that you trained in Texas for a couple months out of the year. What was that like, being away from your family, and like how did you kind of cope with not being around the people that arguably are your biggest supporters?
Yeah, it was definitely different, but luckily, but not luckily, I've been used to staying away from my families for long periods of time, because when I was shooting for the 2020 Paralympics, I would stay down in Omaha for like a week and a half to 2 weeks at a time away from my family, then come home for a few days and then repeat the cycle. And so that kind of taught me how to not live on my own, but live away from them and kind of depend on myself for stuff. So living down in Texas, seeing my family only for about a week and a half throughout the entire summer, it was a little bit different, but I knew it was for a good cause, which it was because I ended up getting silver.
That's right, man. So, how did you recognize that you were burned out? Like, was it something you kind of felt? Was it somebody reach out to you and be like, hey, we kind of see these things on you? I guess, how did you recognize that feeling of being burnt out?
I think it was more me trying to figure out excuses why I don't want to go to train. Like, if it was, I have a test this coming week, I don't think I should go down and train, or there's a football game and I don't really want to, or this kind of is bugging me. So I was kind of finding all of these different excuses not to go train.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of led me to figuring out that I was burnt out at those specific times.
When you kind of started feeling that way with that lack of motivation, what were like some of the strategies that you used to kind of like pull yourself out of that? Was it like more of like a mental toughness thing where it's like, hey, this is for the good, like I need to be doing this? Or was it one of those things where it's like you just found something little each day to like be productive at or find motivation? What was kind of your strategy for that?
It was more my dad kept egging me on to go down and train because I didn't know it was for a good cause and everything, but it was that social part that I was missing in high school that I didn't want to miss. But throughout it, I had friends along the way that we would still hang out Sunday night, so we'd all get together and hang out still, which was nice. So that's what kind of helped me look forward to training, was afterwards I'd get to go out and hang with them.
Yeah, that's one of the big things we've talked about throughout the years, finding those like little places of relaxation to get yourself like kind of back in that reset mode where it's like, hey, I gotta do this, gotta keep grinding, but then getting that little time to yourself to kind of reset and relax. So, what did life sort of look like for you at that time? Like, I know you mentioned that you were looking for excuses not to go. Was any of the other aspects of your life kind of taking a hit? Like, I know especially in high school, you got to deal with, tests and whatnot, preparing for college. Did it affect you in school?
One of the big times it affected me was 2023 of November. It was, I was training for a long weekend, and then I found out my grandpa was in hospice, so I went and saw him. That took a little mental toll on me. And this was because he passed away November 1st of 2023. So this was all of October. The first weekend of October I went and saw him. Second week I was in Japan. He passed away during that time. Then I came back, went to school for half a day, and then went to his funeral, came back for a full day, and I missed another week and a half for a tournament down in Chile. And that's when my grades really dropped for that quarter.
How did you overcome that? Because you're a very smart kid, obviously, and were a lot of your teachers at least like willing to help you out with things, or was it kind of that pressure, like, yeah, you're doing this on the side, but you still gotta get your stuff done?
Yeah, a lot of them have. That's what I'm like one of the most thankful things I'm thankful for is my teachers at Yankton and Sacred Heart Middle School. They were always there to help me and sometimes giving me leeway on deadlines or not having like an exemption from this homework or that.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been really, really prominent about helping me with that.
That's awesome. So, how did you recover from being burnt out?
I recovered through, after I found out that I made the Paralympics, I kind of took a 1.5 to 2 months break from end of February until when I graduated in May. And then, so I took that little break, and then I went full force training throughout the summer. But other times, I had my entire sophomore year, I didn't really play any badminton because the summer before my sophomore year, I found out that I didn't qualify for the 2020 Paralympics, so it kind of took a mental toll on me, and I just didn't want to do anything with badminton or anything. So, but other than that, I kind of give myself relaxations here and there. And after Paris in August, September, I've been kind of relaxed since then.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned at one point when you were training, you pulled something in your groin. And then you also mentioned this past summer you were training like hard every single day. with that, obviously, is like there's weightlifting and movements and exercise involved with that. Did you ever find your body telling you, hey, this is too much?
Not really, but sometimes that I felt like my hamstrings or my quads, my knees getting a little pain, but then it'd be gone. So I knew I was like pushing that line. But my coaches were helpful enough that they knew how far you can be pushed before you can't be pushed. So we would train for 2.5 hours in the morning, have a 2-hour rest period over lunch, where I would take a nap, and then another 2.5 hours of training. And then weekends would be like you don't do anything, you just relax and recover. So that was really good.
Yeah. I know a lot of what's becoming more common in especially collegiate athletics is that you stack programs, so you train very hard at certain points and then you like come out of that, you still maintain strength and ability, but it kind of gives that so you're not over pushing your body. When you were training, especially as you got closer to the Olympics, did your coaches sort of have a plan for that for you? Like,
Yeah.
go really hard, then settle down really hard, just so that way you're not, pushing your body too far?
Yeah, so in badminton, there's a lot of strategy on how to train. So in the beginning of the summer, it was push really hard, get your body to that peak performance, then kind of plateau. And then about a month before the Paralympics, they push you a bit harder and do more gameplay. So then you're at that peak performance level to play, and you're not kind of plateauing, because you want to like reach your max right as you're going to competition.
Absolutely. Got a few more questions for you here. Are there things now that after you've experienced burnout that are like strategies or things you do to like help mitigate that? So like obviously you know what it's felt like and you've been through it, and so are there things you do to kind of like when you feel that like, hey, I'm getting really too stressed out or doing things, are there like strategies or whatnot that you employ on like a day-to-day basis or a month-to-month, week-to-week type of thing to kind of like prevent you from going too far?
When that happens, at least back in high school, I'd go out to the lake and go on. We have these bike trails out by the lake, so me and my buddy would always go do that, or just kind of mess around with friends and hang out and just kind of take your mind off both school and the sport for a little bit.
Absolutely. That's awesome that you have that support staff there to help you. So what kind of practices do you think are most effective for dealing with or like mitigating burnout?
That's a tough question.
If it helps, I can kind of like give you examples. I know some coaches, like I mentioned, like you don't want to overtrain the body, so they have those, performance or those practices where you go really, really hard, kind of settle down and back and forth. There's also some coaches and universities that employ sports psychologists, and they have programs set up so like you have journals where you talk about what you did every day, and then they turn them at the end of the week to make sure all the athletes are meeting not only their academic needs but social and competition needs. There's a couple other things like scheduling fun games during practice or options like that. Or have you done any of those strategies? Or?
Yeah, now that I think about it, a few times this summer we would like have our Fridays would be mostly games. So in the morning it'd be pretty much all singles games, and then Friday afternoon would be all doubles. So you kind of gotta look forward to that during the week. And then every session for that 2.5 hours, the first hour was conditioning. So they would incorporate like relays sometimes. So it'd be first person does this, and then everybody has to do sprints. So it's kind of like who wins, and then the loser would get a punishment, like a few burpees or something like that. So that really helped to push us to do that, but make it fun at the same time.
That's awesome. So, last question here. Appreciate you for your time, by the way, today.
Yeah, no problem.
You mentioned that you started playing badminton at 10 years old. One of the things that comes up most commonly with burnout, especially in younger athletes, is that they are forced to specialize in a sport at a really young age, and by the time as they get older, it just starts to weigh down on them, and it's just like, I have to be so much better, I have to get like this and this and this. And usually typically some of the strategies that are to help like get out of that is playing other sports or finding other activities to do. Other Do you sort of agree with that? Like people are
Yeah.
specializing too early and they need to be involved with other sports. And
Yeah.
how did that play out for you?
I didn't really specialize in badminton until, I don't even know, until probably middle school. So when I was about 13, 14, that's when I started like going hardcore into it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was still playing other sports at that time. So during high school, every single day during the fall, I would go out and golf Monday through Thursday. I would have golf practice, and then I'd try playing like an extra 9 holes right after practice just to do something. And then wintertime, I was involved with the basketball program, and then spring, I was involved with tennis. So I was balancing 2 different sports, which I love to do because I love playing sports, and I got to do multiple different sports.
I'd say it kind of helped take, like,
Yeah.
if you were struggling in badminton, you could go be with the basketball team, forget about it for a
Yeah.
little bit. That's awesome. Do you think, like, more students, or especially at that young age, should be out for more sports? That way you can have kind of those releases?
Yeah, if you like sports, I think you should not specialize in just one sport until you've reached about high school, maybe even like sophomore, junior year. You should try a whole bunch of different sports so you get both that team aspect and you're not so heavily dependent on just this one sport.
All right. Well, that is all the questions I have for you, Miles. I appreciate it. So thank you much.
Thank you.
So now that we have a plan and know how to fix it, burnout, we can sort of put together a plan. Now, I believe one of the best ways of doing this is putting together a little logbook to track how an athlete is doing. So I know Professor Daw, she showed us an example of one she had when she was coaching, and there's a lot of more templates and stuff for that online. But personally, I would have them each day fill out just like on a scale of 1 to 10. How did your day go? And then how are you, like, and along with that, like little subsections, it would be like how are you feeling physically? And if it's like under a 5, leave a little section, have them write why they feel less than a 5 or a 5 or less. Same thing with emotional, like how are we feeling emotionally? Like, are we happy, feeling good, doing well? And if not, like under a 5, why are we feeling upset? And then mentally, how are we feeling mentally? Are we stressed out? What can we do to fix that? And if you're feeling like really stressed out, like under 5 or like, not very well, why is that? Explain to, your coach why, or, trainer or staff, why you're not feeling that way. So I would have them do that for a daily thing. And then at the end of practice, I'd set aside 5 minutes and just have them all bust out the logbook and do the same thing with practice. Like physically, how did you feel at practice? Or like if it was a weightlifting day, how did your weightlifting session go? Are your muscles really sore, or do you feel on top of the world? And then if you feel really sore, why is that? Are you not, getting enough sleep? Are you, not getting enough to eat? Stuff like that. And then along with that, you do the same thing with the emotional and the mental side of it. Are we understanding concepts, drawing up plays, things like that? Do we understand the game we're going to play? So along with that, and you throw in the emotional side with that, how did practice go for you? Were there highs and lows? Were there, in-betweens? Did we, have a bad practice where, we missed a bunch of shots and really wore on us emotionally? And then at the end of the week, I would collect those, or I guess the coaching staff or anybody involved, collect those and then sift through it and see, how your athletes are feeling and what things you can do to improve that and make their overall lives better through like different strategies. I would also have them fill out like a little log after each competition. So, how did you play physically? How did you, what went right? What went wrong? What can we adapt and what can we change to make you perform at a higher level? And then after those competitions, go through those as well and figure out, where the majority of athletes are struggling. And then we can put together plans based on those individualized needs. So with that being said, like if an athlete is not feeling very well, physically, then maybe we figure out why, and like if we need to lessen or lighten up on the load in the weight room, or if they need a little more sleep or recovery time, then we can make adjustments to that, and so that way they're able to recover and perform at their physical best. Along with that, it's kind of the same boat with the emotional factor and the mental factor. If you're not doing emotionally well, do you need to go talk to somebody about it? Can we set up an appointment with a sports psychologist, things like that, or a guidance counselor, just so that way we're expressing these feelings, getting that communication out, and we can solve the problem instead of just addressing it. Same thing with the mental side. If we need to go talk to teachers or other coaches, figure out ways to give like relaxation periods or like more study time, things like that. Putting those, not only like retrieving that data from the athletes and whatnot, but then using that information to put it in place in all these ways described, like giving the athletes more study hours, maybe a shorter practice, so that way they have that time to go to bed early so they can recover. Or emotionally, maybe we have like a fun practice, or we play a game at the end of practice to really boost everybody's moods, that light friendly competition amongst teammates. It can really do wonders, and using these strategies to make yourselves not only better athletes but a more cohesive team is a really huge part of that. Along with that, I would have the athletes learn self-regulation theories. So setting that time away to relax, making sure they have their own personal time, teaching them imagery strategies, so before a competition they can see themselves making those plays. It boosts that confidence in them, and they're not so worried about it mentally or emotionally. They can go out and perform at their best when they see themselves. Or setting goals throughout little games, like, hey, maybe during today's game, I'm gonna pass the ball more, or, I'm gonna hit all of my blocks in the right spot. I'm not gonna get beat, on a defense. And then positive self-talk. That can be really huge, especially for an athlete. About 80% of our thoughts as humans is in a negative form. We always look towards the pessimistic side of things. But when we reverse that, it really leads to an improved physical state, emotional state, as well as the right mentality. Having that positive self-talk, it makes you feel a lot better. And according to a study done by Top Mental Game, positive self-talk can increase our performance levels by 11%, which is incredibly, like, it doesn't sound like a lot, obviously, but when you're maybe you're only at 90% before the competition, and you just have those positive self-talks and those words of affirmation, it can get you up to like playing at 100%. You feel good about yourself. Maybe mentally, since you feel so well, you block out maybe a pain that you have, or like you slightly rolled your ankle, but it's good enough to play on it. When you have those words of self-talk, like, hey, my ankle doesn't hurt, or I'm very strong, I'm capable of this. When we do those things, then it sort of blocks out that pain, very much like a placebo effect of sorts, especially if it were to come to physical injuries. Along with that, you put in a healthy sleep schedule. According to the Children's Hospital of Colorado, in a study they performed, they found that when we get between 8 and 10 hours of sleep as athletes, that puts us in an optimal position to perform. We have a faster muscle recovery. Our muscles are able to like break down and then rebuild quicker. And along with that, we have a quicker reaction time and better cognitive performance. We can see plays before they happen. We can pick up on certain keys and things or tells that a player is giving away, so that way we can use it to better play the game. So this can be used at all levels as well. It would be a little bit more difficult with high school, especially with a lack of coaches, but you can start teaching them strategies to keep themselves engaged with sports. So like if they're very worried about their grades and whatnot, you can teach them time management skills. You have time here, get something knocked out, or get this assignment done, or maybe we can't do this right now, but we have enough time to do this. So that way they're staying on top of things academically, And then that allows them to give themselves more time to sleep, to relax, to do things they enjoy, to kind of get away from all of that constant, being around the sport and that drain and that burnout. So doing those logbooks, and then also at the beginning of the year and also throughout the year, teaching those athletes how to take care of themselves and what works well, and teaching them a discipline. A lot of these things, like a bad sleep schedule, not having words of affirmation, it can sometimes come from being undisciplined. So we just aren't trained to think that way. We aren't prepared to act in a certain way. And so we don't have that discipline, or time management skills to get something done here, get something done there. We need to focus in. And so teaching that discipline along with all of that and throughout the year can really help and elevate the performance of an athlete as well, to not experience burnout, so that way they can get those times to themselves and free themselves from things that are going on that they don't want to deal with, or that they can't deal with. I think putting all these together, the logbook, the teachings, the adjustments, the adaptations, and things like that, I think all of that combined together would be an ideal plan. I think it would work really well. If you look at a lot of universities across the country, they're very, very focused on mental health. I know at Ole Miss, their football program, they were the first ones to ever become all mental health certified, to be able to deal with various situations like that and examine and be able to understand mental health disabilities or problems or things going wrong with that. And so that's huge, and it's becoming more and more of that. When, like I mentioned earlier, the best ability is availability. So coaches want to keep their players on the field, court, whatever, and by doing these things, by keeping logbooks and putting in the time and the effort to make sure your athletes are performing at their best and not getting burned out, is the ideal situation to prevent burnout. Along with that, you have to put it on the athlete themselves to be disciplined and employ these strategies. So it needs to be taught that they need to have that discipline, or everybody's different. They need to find out what works for them. Maybe one guy, he doesn't need all the positive self-talk and affirmation, or another guy, he needs that, but he doesn't need all the sleep. He just runs off a little amount of sleep. It's things like that, and adapting to each individual person's needs to get them to perform at their highest level is the ideal situation. And you can find that through having the players self-evaluate themselves, as well as coaches and trainers and whatnot keep an eye on these athletes to make sure they're picking up on things as well.